Well, happy day after Memorial Day. Happy everything to all of you. We're delighted to have you with us on the 700 Club. Well, the forecasters say Alberto, which is the first named storm of 2018, still poses a threat after its landfall on Memorial Day. The storm is dumping heavy rains in the south, raising risks of flash flooding.
Well, one Maryland town felt the full force of heavy rains this weekend. Residents in Ellicott City are surveying damage from the devastating floods. Charlene Aaron has that story.
Subtropical Storm Alberto made landfall Monday afternoon in the Florida Panhandle. Florida's governor issuing this warning to residents.
Be very, very, very careful out there. If you're needing to travel, just make sure you're very cautious about that.
Tropical rains extended to the Carolinas, where a local news crew covering the storm was killed after a falling tree struck their SUV. Before Alberto made landfall, another system pounded Maryland with heavy rains. Historic flooding devastated the town of Ellicott City. More than 8 inches of rain in 3 hours washed away cars, roads, homes, and businesses. People climbed to higher ground to escape the rushing water.
No, the water is, this muddy water is moving really, really quickly, and there's no way you could cross it.
300 people were rescued. Maryland National Guardsman Edison Herman is missing after he fell into the floodwaters trying to help a woman searching for her cat.
He took a couple of steps in and it just swept him away.
This is the second time the city has been hit. In 2016, it was hammered by deadly flooding. Many businesses were just recovering.
We are going to rebuild. We've been down this road. We know the story, and we're rebuilding.
Similar flash floods could hit the south in the coming days as drenching rains from Alberto spread over much of Alabama and Georgia as it heads to Tennessee and the Carolinas. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, we'll keep you up to date on what's happening in the weather, but going overseas now, Israel is striking back after an attack from Gaza. Mortar fire came in. Hopefully the Iron Dome stopped most of them. But Ephraim Graham has more of our top stories from the CBN newsroom. Here's Ephraim.
Pat, Israel's military struck targets in Gaza Tuesday in response to a mortar barrage launched at southern Israel from the Palestinian-held territory. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised to respond with, quote, great force to the attack. Israeli Defense Forces report the Iron Dome aerial defense system intercepted most of the 25 mortars. One reportedly landed outside a kindergarten, but no children were there. Residents ran for bomb shelters as those sirens sounded.
My daughter had the baby in the carriage and had to try and figure out a way to get the baby and her 3-year-old into the safe room at the same time while she hears the red alerts going off, while she hears the explosions in the background. It's been a really scary morning.
Palestinian activists have been holding massive protests on the Gaza border for weeks. Scary morning indeed, Pat.
You know, I don't know about you folks, but I can't understand this. This was something that Ariel Sharon set up. You know, he said, okay, we'll give you some independence in Gaza. Well, that's nice. Well, the trouble is that the Palestinian Authority really isn't in charge of things. Hamas is. Hamas is a terrorist organization. But what are they trying to accomplish? Are they just putting these people out as, you know, cannon fodder? Because they can't possibly beat Israel. They can't possibly overcome them militarily. And they launch 10 or 15 mortars into Israel, which is going to provoke an attack coming back the other way. And so a number of Gazan residents are going to be killed. Why are they doing it? What is it going on? What's in their mind that brings about this kind of nonsense? And sooner or later, they're going to have to behave themselves. But I don't know why Israel is holding off. Sooner or later, they ought to go in there and say, look, Gaza is nice to have an independent nation, but we cannot abide a terrorist group on our border, and so therefore we're closing it down. They should never have turned it loose to begin with. Ephraim?
Pat, President Trump confirms a high-ranking official from North Korea is on his way to the U.S., tweeting this morning. Kim Young-chol, the vice chairman of North Korea, headed now to New York. It is the latest development in the past several days, signaling the Singapore summit may be back on after President Trump canceled it just last week. Saturday, Kim Jong-un met with South Korea's President Moon, and later, a U.S. delegation met with North Korean leaders in Pyongyang. Also that same day, from the Oval Office, President Trump said they're now working towards a June 12th summit. Pat?
You know, I'm sure the president has gotten a lot of heat, like he's a monkey, doesn't know what he's doing. But this is brilliant. This move has been brilliant. So instead of him trying to seek out this summit, he says, I'm out of here. I don't want this. You're going to insult my vice president. You're going to say terrible things. You're going to make provocative statements. If that's the way you want to play it, I'm gone. And so suddenly, now the Koreans are coming back and say, please, Mr. President, please keep the summit going. We actually want it. Please do it. Brilliant. Ephraim.
Pat, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is working to free an American pastor imprisoned in Turkey. Andrew Brunson has been jailed for 19 months on false charges. Pompeo will meet with the Turkish foreign minister in June to discuss Brunson's release.
So I've spoken with the Turkish foreign minister at least once, maybe twice in my first 3 weeks. In each case, I've talked about the incredible need for them to return Pastor Brunson. It's just deeply wrong, immoral, unjust. No success so far, but you can be assured that we're working diligently on that.
Secretary Pompeo will also share the findings of a new State Department report on global religious freedom today. Be sure to stay with CBNnews.com for coverage of his remarks. You can also tune into the 700 Club Wednesday for our report from Washington. The Secretary of State also pledged to quickly fill a State Department post monitoring anti-Semitism around the world. In Europe, anti-Semitism is a steadily growing problem. As Dale Hurd reports, it is not isolated to one country. It's been sweeping across the entire continent.
This phone video from Berlin showing a man wearing a Jewish cap being attacked in the street went viral, creating a national controversy in Germany and causing Chancellor Angela Merkel to admit publicly that the large numbers of Arab refugees her government has brought into Germany have brought anti-Semitism with them. The head of Germany's Jewish community even advised German Jews to stop wearing kippahs or Jewish caps in public. But other leaders called for all Germans to wear kippahs, and it resulted in the largest show of support for German Jews since before the Second World War.
Hiding ourselves, that is not the solution to anti-Semitism. That has never been the solution. That only strengthens the people that are trying to make us afraid.
France was shocked after an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor was murdered in what French police call an anti-Semitic hate crime. She was stabbed 11 times before her body was set on fire. 300 French leaders issued a manifesto denouncing a new anti-Semitism that is leading to what the manifesto called an ethnic purge of Jews from France. Even in Britain, apparent widespread anti-Semitism by members of the Labour Party has become a political scandal. The new anti-Semitism that has swept across Europe has come to Belgium as well, and it's the same story. Physical attacks and cursing of Jews in the street. In this security video posted on Twitter, a man is seen ripping the mezuzah or religious sign off the door of an Antwerp synagogue, then throws it on the ground. This is so common now in some parts of Europe, we visited one synagogue that just took its mezuzah down. Israel's president says anti-Semitism is again in full sight in Europe.
There's concern in Hungary. There's concern in France. There is a concern of a new and very ugly wave of anti-Semitism sweeping Western Europe. And I think that we will see more Jews coming to Israel.
Alan Hoffman is head of the Jewish Agency, which helps Jews return to Israel.
We hear of Jewish children being taunted in public schools. And so families say, if this is what the future is going to look like, I don't think that this is what I'd like to see for my children.
In Poland, this Holocaust survivor says people still whisper that Hitler did a lot of bad things, but he also freed us from the Jews. But Jews in Europe today know what happened in the 1930s, and seemed determined to not make the same mistake again. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Heartbreaking report. Pat.
You know, when I was over there some years ago, I was astounded, frankly, at the level of anti-Semitism in places like Romania, where at best they had maybe 3,000 Jews in the whole country. But there was this virulent anti-Semitism, and you think, what is wrong? Well, I tell you what it is. It's a spiritual thing, because the Jews are an evidence of God Almighty, and somehow those who don't share those spiritual values go on the other side, and they become anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish. And of course, with the influx of Arabs into Europe, it's no wonder that this is not taking shape. But we've seen the same thing with the United Nations. The resolutions they keep bringing out of that General Assembly are just shocking. All the stuff they come up with invariably point to Israel. They invariably blame the Jews for everything and excuse the Arabs for everything they do. No condemnation of Arab extremes, but always a condemnation of Israel. Well, it's there, and it's time we do something about it, but we've got to say never again. We cannot allow another Holocaust. But the world is heading in that direction. It looks like there may be a serious attack by the nations against Israel. It's going to come, the Bible forecasts it. Ephraim?
Pat, a man who is now being called a real-life Spider-Man rescued a child dangling from a balcony in Paris this weekend. 22-year-old Mamadou Gassama scaled 4 floors of an apartment building to save that child just moments away from falling to the concrete. He reached the toddler in seconds, saving the child's life. Gassama is an immigrant who arrived from Mali just a few months ago, and he says that God helped him to save that baby. For his heroic action, Gassama has now been awarded French citizenship and a job with the Paris Fire Brigade. President Trump praised the Indiana public school teacher who put himself between a school shooter and his students last week. The president called Jason Seaman a hero Monday. Seaman told his side of the story for the first time. CBN News reporter Amber Strong has more.
Not all heroes wear capes.
My actions on that day, in my mind, were the only acceptable actions.
7th grade science teacher Jason Seaman is being dubbed a hero for what many are calling selfless actions and quick thinking.
Oh yes, active shooter, Noblesville West Middle School.
The 39-year-old confronted a student armed with 2 handguns at an Indiana middle school Friday. According to students, the teacher and football coach threw a basketball at the gunman's head and charged.
I deeply care for my students and their well-being, so that is why I did what I did that day.
I just didn't want to die.
Seaman was shot 3 times, but just a few days later, he's out of the hospital, on the road to recovery, and being showered with praise from his students.
He literally risked his life for us, so that was really, really heroic of him.
And even the White House. Friends and students say Seaman's actions aren't really a surprise. Taking to Twitter, one student said, "Mr. Seaman always told us he would take a bullet for any one of his students." 13-year-old Ella Whistler was also shot. She was last listed in critical but stable condition. During the incident, teachers reportedly secured the doors with belts, while some students took to prayer.
We all got together and had a huge prayer circle and spent probably about 15 minutes praying for everyone.
This is the 3rd time in recent weeks a civilian has taken down a shooter. Like Seaman, James Shaw Jr. was also unarmed when he disarmed a gunman at a Waffle House in suburban Nashville. And 2 bystanders shot and killed a shooter last Thursday at a restaurant in Oklahoma. Amber Strong, CBN News.
Thank God for that brave teacher. Pat?
I tell you, the president suggested arming teachers, and everybody was horrified, but what he said is exactly true. If these teenage gunmen think they're going to be met with deadly force, they will be hesitant before they go into a school and start pulling a trigger. If the teachers are armed or somebody that's armed can shoot back, I know this is a terrible thing to talk about, but we've got to defend ourselves. And if these students are helpless and they feel helpless, You don't want the students having guns. That would be horrible. They shoot each other. But to have responsible teachers with gun training, weapons training, teaching how to handle them, how to fire them, how to preserve them, how to keep them out of trouble, to have somebody like that in a school or several people like that, it would deter much of this school violence. I know this is only one of the things that could be done. There's so many other things that need to be done, especially to look at the mental health of students. But we cannot allow our children to be slaughtered like sheep by some crazy gunman. We can't allow it to happen anymore.